This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing with a guy today who has done a lot of bass catching. Recorded show today. I'm currently in Minnesota trying to figure out, well, hopefully I've got it figured out. In all likelihood, I don't have it figured out. And I'm catching a lot of muskie and rock bass and walleye, but Leech Lake for the 7th Bassmaster Open EQ of the season. Talked a little bit last week with Brandon McMillan about kind of the excitement of going to a lake that you've never been to before. Trying to figure it out, trying to break it down, trying to figure out whether you want to target the largemouth or the smallmouth. You have new types of cover, wild rice, which I wonder if our guest today has caught them pretty much every way you can catch them. And he did a lot of catching in the final BPT event of the 2024 season. So much so that they gave him a check for $100,000 for doing it. Is the one and only Michael Neal. Michael, thanks for jumping on BTL.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thanks.
Have you ever fished wild rice?
No, I was just thinking that when you said that. I've never even heard of it growing in a body of water that we've been on. So that would
it's freaking crazy. I know that they've set out all sorts of stuff for this event. It's off limits for information now as we go, but it's like you have like harvestable wild rice, and then you can like kind of stay on the outside, and it's not that often that you go to a fishery after you've been doing this for a while where you have an entirely new type of cover that you've never fished before.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it now, trying to look up what it even looks like. It seems like I've heard of rice being on the Mississippi River, like around La Crosse. I've sat and thought about it, but I don't know.
But I guess like the native Indian tribes up there are able to go out on the lake and then like harvest it.
Huh.
And
yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
It's real interesting. But dude, congratulations on your second BPT win last week on the St. Lawrence River. And if you watched the final day of that event, the second half of the day was not a very pleasant time to be on the water trying to catch a bass.
No, not the knockout or championship round, but I mean, the good thing is the wind was blowing with the current, so it was easy to position your boat to make drifts. Versus if it was blowing against the current, it would have been that much worse. But I mean, I was having to crank up and move back up and make another drift. There was no sitting and spot locking or staying in one spot and trying to make repeated casts. That just was not going to happen those 2 days.
One of the big things on the St. Lawrence, and I think not a lot of people realize, is how important the wind direction is. You guys are out of Messina, so the lake was not in play for you. So guys would think, the wind probably doesn't matter that much. They can't go out on the lake. But when you combine that stronger current with the wind, a lot of strategy involved there, because that doesn't, like when it's blowing against it, totally jack up the drift and the flow and how you can present your bait.
Yeah, I mean, the fish, even just how the fish position, when it would blow against the current, they would suspend a lot more. You'd actually see some up chasing balls of bait and things. But when it's blowing with it, I mean, it's going, close to 2 miles an hour, even more than 2 miles an hour in some places. And it's all you can do just to keep your bait on the bottom. But you do know where the fish are going to be when that happens. They're going to be either on one of those up current facing points or on the leeward side where it's kind of rolling over their back, just waiting on something to wash by, and wash the bait by a few of them that were pretty good ones.
Is that a fishery where it's really hard to get a handle on it the first time you're there? Is that one of those fisheries where the more time you're there, typically the better your results are going to get?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just a place where, especially like we were in Messina, you've got about 100 miles or so of actual fishable water. That, I mean, and the tournament, like, especially every fish counts, can be won anywhere in that. If it was just a 5-fish deal, you pretty much have to go at least close to the lake from Clayton down, at least to have a shot to win. But to cover that much water and break it down, it's really hard. And if you can find enough single rocks or isolated places, and that's what I had done. I really broke down one area that I've fished in all 4 times I've been there now, and really just broke it down, found each individual rock, each rock seam where I could pull up, make a quick drift, and go to the next one. And I think that kind of made a big difference, being able to hone in on one area versus trying to run the whole river.
Yeah, 2 things you mentioned there, the every fish counts, where I know there were a lot of guys that went in trying to see how the largemouth played. I had Jacob Wheeler on last week. He said he had some largemouth that played. I had some guys that were like, dude, we got a ton of bites. It went back. They were all 2-pounders. And then the second half of that is also when you get to your fishing water, you can actually fish the rest of the day and not have to worry about getting 50, 60, 70 miles back to Messina. But talk about how those two factors, the largemouth factor with the every fish counts, and then the once you're there factor kind of played into your strategy.
Yeah, the largemouth to me, I didn't even have a largemouth bait tied on.
Really?
I went with all spinning rods. I did have a jerk bait tied on to go up shallow and throw across a couple sand spots and stuff, but that was really it for me. That wasn't going to be a player. When you look at that place, it's really not it doesn't have a whole ton of what I would call prime largemouth habitat, like where you go to Champlain or something, you've got a ton of shallow bays with reeds and milfoil, grass, things like that. And there's just not a ton of that at the St. Lawrence. So I really felt like, yeah, there would be some guys do it. There would be some guys that would catch some, but I didn't feel like you could run through them for 6 days in a row and actually be able to compete at the final day. And that's why I really stuck with smallmouth. But like you said, too, once you get there, and we were able to trailer all week. So most of us drove anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half away from the boat ramp. Most days I was not even fishing until 10 or 15 minutes after lines in before I actually got to my spot. But once I was there, you didn't have to worry about getting back all day. You got to fish all the way until lines out at 4 o'clock. So you had a solid, our normal day, 7.5 hours. You had 7 to 7 hours and 15 minutes worth of 100% fishing time, where you were just locked in and not have to worry about, 1, keeping fish alive in the live well, and 2, making that long run back.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was towards the end of the final round, you kind of knew you were going to win at that point, but you kept asking your official how much weight you had. And then you said, I thought if I could get to 85, I would have a shot. It seems like you were mainly fishing against yourself and not against whatever, you know what I mean though? Like, it was like you went out that day, not worried like how far you are behind or ahead, but did you go out with like a target weight in mind, and then whatever happens around that?
Yeah, I really thought it would take over 100 to begin with, but that was before I really thought I didn't think the wind was going to be as strong. And in the first period, it wasn't bad at all. You could really fish however you wanted to. You could actually stay on a spot, make repeated casts, and it wasn't a drifting deal. So I thought it would be somewhere between 100 and 125 pounds to win. I thought if you got over 115, you'd probably be safe, but could take up to 125. And then when that wind started really blowing in the second period, I knew it wasn't going to be as much. And, your cameraman and your official always ask you during the break, like, especially after the second one, what do you think it's going to take? What do you think you got to have to win? And I think I had right at 50 pounds after the second period. And I said, if I can get to 85, I think I'll be good. And somewhere a little north of that's what I actually wound up with. So, yeah, you've always got to keep that target weight in your mind. And going into the day, that's how I kind of related is I wanted to catch 10 every period. Well, that was one basically every 15 minutes. So, like in the first period, you heard me say, well, I've caught 2 already in 20 minutes. I've got another 25 minutes to catch another one. Like, if you can just stay on that pace, you know what it's going to take at the end of the day. And my average had been 3 pounds plus all week. So I knew if I could get to that 30 fish mark by the end of the day, I'd be around 100, give or take, somewhere in that neighborhood. So didn't quite get all the way up there, but can't complain when you win either way.
Statistically, you're one of the best guys who's ever done it in the Every Fish Counts format. I thought it was interesting. John Hunter and you kind of went back and forth a little bit until you pulled ahead at the end. But it also looked like you like saved some stuff for like 20 or 30 minutes left in the day, which to me would have been really hard not to like run there when Hunter had like an 8 or 9 pound lead on you. what was the decision making to hit those isolated rocks? You said that you'd fished them in years past, and not to like do that in the middle of the day or when you were back a couple pounds, but to use that spot to ice the tournament instead of get caught back up.
It was just I kind of kept it in my back pocket all week. I knew there was some fish on it from practice. I pulled up, made one cast, and caught one off of each place and saw some more with them. But I knew it wasn't going to be a place where you could, catch 20 pounds or so. But I knew I could go there and catch 3 or 4. So I felt like the bigger concentration of fish was out where – so the deepest water around where those fish were was about 45 feet. Wasn't really a whole lot of bait. It was just kind of a chute that the current all funnels through, and it wasn't a big area where a massive concentration of fish could be, which is where I spent most of my time in the first and second period, that I felt like I could run across a big school and catch 4 or 5 in a row pretty quick off of a couple different places. Even though it wasn't even out of sight. It was maybe 1.5 miles apart or something, but it was just kind of my safety blanket that I was keeping in my back pocket, that if I knew I needed that it wouldn't take me, but it's pull up, make one cast, go to the next one, a couple hundred yards, pull up, make one cast. It's not hard to fish, and just tried to save that as long as I could.
Can you run us through the arsenal of baits that got the job done?
Yeah, I really just did 2 things. I threw a little finesse football jig. It's actually the Beast Coast Tungsten one, not a sponsor, but it's a good bait, 1/2 ounce. I threw that on a casting rod. So the rod for both techniques was, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit. We both really like it. It's a Denali Covert. It's a 7.5 foot medium action. I like the longer rod, especially when I'm doing anything offshore that's not involving a minnow. This is my go-to rod. So shaky head, drop shot, swim bait, anything like that. It's got enough tip to where you're not going to lose those fish. I was throwing 7-pound line on my spinning rod, 7-pound sunline shooter with a 10-pound leader. And when you're using that light of line, if you go too stiff on your rod or too fast of an action where it's got too much backbone, you're going to lose fish. You're going to break them off. There's really nothing you can do about it. So I think the rod was pretty important too. And even on the football jig, I had this same exact rod that I gave to a guy that he actually comes and picks up rods at the store and fixes guides and things like that. And he took that rod, changed the reel seat out on it to a casting reel seat, changed the first couple guides out to smaller guides so it looked more like a casting rod. But I knew the capabilities of that rod, what it could do, what it couldn't do, what its limitations were. And, that's what I really stuck with, something I had a lot of confidence in. But for the bait, I've heard tons, just like everybody else has, about the fuzzy dice deal for over the past, 2 years now. And I made my own on my first off day. So I've never even really bought into the hype, never thought that much about it, but was throwing, your traditional shapes like the Somali and the Smalley Smasher and things like that. The first couple of days of practice, didn't really have a problem getting bit. But the first day of the tournament, I started noticing it was one of those days where the current was backing up. You could actually see the fish a little bit on scope. They'd come chase your bait. Like I remember one time I had like 8 of them just following my drop shot on the bottom, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, why they wouldn't eat it. I changed baits, went to that modified quarantine crawl that I just stuck silicone skirt strands through it, and at least half of them started biting every time you'd see one get around your bait. So it may not be – I was in the same area too. Nothing changed. Wind didn't change. Depth didn't change. It was just, it seemed like that skirt material was actually triggering them to bite one way or the other.
That's just weird.
It is. It is weird. And I don't know what they think it looks like. And that's what I was, in my off day, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? What color am I going to put in here? Well, I'm going to stick with green pumpkin. They bite green pumpkin no matter what they do. I like the green pumpkin purple copper. So I used that body, put green pumpkin skirts in there. And I was like, well, I caught some fish in practice that had some crawdad pinchers in their throat, and they had a little bit of orange. So I took one strand of orange and would put it on the end. So if they thought it was a crawdad, they had a little bit of orange. If they thought it was a goby, it was pretty much just green pumpkin. So really don't know what it looked like, but they ate it.
There's a pretty dominant group on the invitationals at the top 5 there. And that rubber dice played for a number of them, which blew my mind. Like, I'm not even going to say who and exactly where, but it was like, really? And they're like, dude, yeah, it's like the deal. You're like, cool. I just don't get it.
Yeah,
It's so
and
weird.
I mean, I know they make different ones, some that are meant to be fished without a weight and things like that. But I mean, I was throwing a 1/2 ounce weight on a drop shot, just keeping it on the bottom. But I'm actually going to put that thing in a pool at the house and try and figure out what it actually does in the water so I can see it for myself on the
New
bottom.
bait coming soon from Michael Neal. Guaranteed. All right, so I pulled this up. So I do want to go back to the rod. Full disclosure, you're sponsored by Denali. Denali, longtime sponsor of BTL. I've used them in the opens for the last 5 years. So yes, we are talking up a rod that we are both sponsored by and that sponsors the show. That being said, you 100%. I came up to you a couple years ago. We were going up north. I said, what do you suggest for up north? I was always been a big fan of the 7.4 multi-spin. And I think you're a big fan of that for a lot of applications too. But then you were like, you got to try this one. I ordered a couple and I was like, dude, this thing is like a rubber band. Like I didn't feel like I was ever getting anything in, like the hook in it, but you do not lose smallmouth on it. It is unbelievable what you can do with the smallmouth hook. Here's the video of it. You can just see like, what kind of bend would you call that, Michael? Is that a parabolic bend or is it not?
Yeah, I'd call it parabolic. I mean, it bends almost to the first guide when you really load it up. And that's the thing too. Like I like a light wire hook. Gamakatsu just came out with, in conjunction with Brent Ayler, it's a stinger hook in the G Finesse lineup. That's the same thing kind of as the wacky worm hook that I like with the longer shank, but it's made for threading baits on there. So it's got a little keeper welded on it about halfway down the hook shank, holds your bait on there really nicely, keeps it from tearing up. But I mean, that right there, just, I mean, most 7.5 foot rods you see are not going to do that. Most people like that multi-spin you were talking about. It's more of a medium heavy. I like it for, Ned rigs or something with a little bit stouter hook, but especially as much line as I was having to let out in the last couple of days with all that wind, my bait would be 100+ feet from the boat, plus another 40 to 60 feet on the bottom. And that's a lot of line you got to take up. So you need that longer rod. But you also want a soft one to where it just loads up and you just slowly get that hook penetrated in their mouth. And that's hands down the best spinning rod that I've ever used for any kind of open hook applications.
Is this also what you're talking about right here, where you watch the rod, you'll see like you lift and then see it like, I mean, that's a solid 6-8 inches where that rod is already loaded, but then it gives you more of that rubber band deal. There's not, I mean, I know the Johnstons will use like the 7.6, like he's got the hair rod and stuff, but for the most part, that's kind of abnormal for up there, a rod that bends like that for the smallmouth fishing. Most of it's fast action or with a super fast tip on it, right?
Yeah, it seems like it. And that's just not, it seems like every year that I fish spinning rod or casting rods, like I go more limber, slower action rods. I feel like I just lose less fish that way when you're fighting them. Now, you can't go too over the top. You got to match your hook gauge for that rod bend. But if you match it up right, you're going to be able to catch way more fish and keep them hooked once they're coming through the boat. That's a big deal with these smallmouth. It doesn't matter if they dig, if they jump, whatever. You use a lighter wire hook and a pretty limber rod, and it's going to get you a lot more fish to the boat.
How freaking big was that one?
I think that was a 5.11. I think is that one.
When you're up north in smallmouth, the portion that I'm circling right here, that's the determining factor, like that shows it's a big one, right? You want the eye hump, and then you want the head to go down, and then you want it to look somewhat like a triple tail or a red ear.
Yep, those are big ones. That actually, I won big fish of the day with that one, so I think that's another $1,000 coming my way.
That's insane. And then 7-pound test too is light. You're talking a lot of zebra mussels. There's a lot of stuff on the St. Lawrence with that, but confident with that 7-pound. You think that got you more bites? I know guys go everywhere from 12 to 5 on the St. Lawrence.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you talk to most guys and they tend to stick somewhere around that 10-pound range. But I mean, the St. Lawrence is just like any other fishery. It gets way more pressure now than it ever has. And I think you've got to go with that lighter line. And I'm a shooter guy. Sunline makes all kinds of different fluorocarbons. They make leader, sniper, super, assassin, even structure and things like that. But that shooter for a spinning rod leader, to me, I keep 7, 8, 9, and 12 in my boat. I really could skip the 8, go 7, 9, 12. But when I'm ultra finessey or super clear water, I like the 7. The 9's kind of my more heavy cover bottom baits, and then the 12 is what I use for minnow type stuff anymore.
And then what are you on the braid? Because I know, I mean, the kind of personal question, but I'm trying to figure out between the pink sinking stuff and the new Overwatch and then the SX1. There's a bunch of different braids out.
Yeah, the SX1 has been a staple for 10, 15 years now. That's a great braid. You cannot go wrong with it. My personal favorite right now is the Overwatch, and that's what I was using 90% of the time. And that, like that clip you just showed, that was Overwatch. I could tell. I also used the All Might some. I like the olive color instead of the pinks, just a little bit different. But I think the Overwatch and the SX1 are a little bit better options in the stout current. Versus open water. I think the open water, the All Might's a little bit better because it does sink, but I think the sinking properties of it, I think the current kind of caught it a little bit, so that Overwatch allowed me to have a little bit straighter contact with my bait. And
then you were also using a heavy drop shot.
Yeah, half ounce. I mean, I was fishing anywhere from 30 to 65 feet at times. Tried to stay in the 40 to 55 was my most comfortable range, and I was using a half ounce, the Denali Covert tungsten drop shot weight, just a teardrop. And I tried a 3/4 a little bit, but when you're throwing that 3/4, especially with that light line, if one comes up and jumps, he's going to snap your line somewhere because that weight's just too heavy. And as soon as I put it on there, I caught one, and then it come up and jumped and broke it. And I'm like, I'm not going to fight this. I'm just going to stick with a half.
A really good year on the BPT. We've seen guys like Wheeler and Cadell just go unconscious for the last 3 or 4 years. But he had a 5th place finish, 19th, 21st, 2nd, 38th, and then you closed it with a 2nd, a 5th, and a 1st, and still top 5'd it. How tough is it to stay at the top of the BPT right now? It seems like there's a group of guys that just do not miss.
Yeah, no, it's that's what I told somebody else earlier, and it's really hard to fish in the Bass Pro Tour with the every fish format and not fish your strength. If you don't fish your strength on whatever body of water it is and find a way to make that work, you're not going to have a very good tournament. You might still scrap through and get a check, which would just be a top 40, but you're not going to be able to be in contention to win if you don't fish your strengths. And I've just got, a handful of different things that I feel like I can go do anywhere across the country and have a good shot to compete, whether it's, finesse fishing for smallmouth. That's seemed to work out pretty well. I don't consider myself a smallmouth guy, but or throwing a vibrating jig, swim jig, things like that down in Florida, or just finesse fishing for largemouth in general, whenever it may be. But I try to just do what I have the confidence in, and I can make work on whatever body of water that we're at.
I like it. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, Michael Neal, also the owner of Real Deal Tackle in Dayton, Tennessee, on the shores of Lake Chickamauga. Did I get that right?
That's right.
We are also on the back end of ICAST, which was just last month. And I want to talk maybe about some new tackle trends, some baits on the market, what you've seen in the retail business. I know in recent shows, specifically with skeet, was talking about skeet fishing and how challenging that and rewarding, but also how challenging that has been in today's competitive and tournament fishing climate. So we'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, more with 2-time BPT champion Michael Neal. This is BTL.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
legendary brand. Top on Strike King.
Gear that just plain works. Cast after cast after cast. AFCO. Any fish, any water.
Gamakatsu, the innovation leader in fish hooks, is launching Nano Alpha technology in 2024. Nano Alpha is a new finish available on Gamakatsu's most popular hook styles. It delivers 2 times slicker performance, 4 times better corrosion resistance. Nano Alpha technology makes the world's greatest fish hooks even better in 2024 to help anglers catch more fish.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
All right, welcome back, BTO with Michael Neal. We talked a lot about the on the water stuff. Now let's talk a little bit about the off the water. I don't think people give you enough credit for the businessman that you are off the water. If you see Michael at any like the Classic or IK, you're always like behind, like working on like spreadsheets and Excel, and like, is that something that you like enjoy doing? The back end, the business side, the retail side of the game.
Yeah, I do. That's what I've been doing today is ordering product. We had the Bass High School and Junior National Championships right before I left for St. Lawrence, and it kind of ransacked the shop a little bit. So I've got some reorders to put in, but I really enjoy it. It's something I got into in 2012. We were at the boat ramp. It was Dayton Boat Dock, and started a small tackle shop with just a little bit of inventory. And in the last 12 years, we've really grown. We moved to a new building about almost 2 years ago now, and really expanded the online presence. And it's just cool. It's a little bit unique perspective for me to be able to stock the store and, keep up with the trends like you were just alluding to earlier. And it's something changing all the time, and it changes within the season almost. It's like every month something's going to change. You never know what's really going on or what's really fixing to happen. And but I'm able to see up front, kind of get a little bit of insight and before you get there, before it really gets public, and see what's coming. Just like this fuzzy dice thing, I've seen that happening for the past year and a half. With some different brands of stuff, and as soon as they come in, they're just gone. And even though I didn't really buy into it, now I'm starting to see it. Now I'm starting to understand. So it's just always something to learn in fishing, no matter what's going on.
Skeet sounded concerned, and he's just on the rod and reel end of it. Also has hard bait sponsors, but he's like, man, he said it went from a 70% bait casting sales to 70% spinning rod sales in I think I would put it as a 2 or 3 year time span. Have you noticed that in the tackle industry and the trend of a total switch in what people want?
Yeah, I would say it's close to a half and half spinning rod sales now. And it, like he said in the past, it was probably an 80-20 or something like that. And spinning rods really weren't a big focus, especially on a lake like Chickamauga, where it's a famed big fish lake. But I mean, even tackle sales, like, jerk baits, like the Spro stick and stuff, jerk baits are probably more prevalent than ever now, but the sales on them aren't as high as they have been. And the only thing I can attribute that to is forward facing sonar, and people are actually seeing their bait in relation to the cover, in relation to brush piles, stumps, whatever.
Breaking off.
And they're able to keep it away from it. So, I mean, it's a weird deal. It's hurt some of the, your typical hard baits. But then there's some others that are coming and up and coming that are doing better than ever. It's just it's a trade off, and it's something that's going to balance out eventually. In the springtime, your plastics around the spawn were just as dominant as ever. And it's a lot of guys that it depends on what tournaments you've got in town as to what you're going to sell too. If you've got, more of your old school mentality, a lot of the old school stuff does sell really well. But then when you've got your high schools and your college and your anglers like that have grown up with the live scope mentality, it's like the hard baits and a lot of those things don't even move at all. They just sit and collect dust. So it's definitely changing, but it's changed just even the live scope world, the jig heads and things, the sizes that everybody wanted, the hook sizes, the bait sizes, like in the last year, it's changed from March to now. So it's something that's going to continue to evolve and change, and everything's going to come back full circle eventually. Just like, a spinnerbait, it's been around 40 plus years now, kind of had a die off. And then it seems like, 5 to 8 years ago, it really had a resurgence. So I think it's going to be one of those deals with everything again.
Interesting. Anything that you noticed from ICAST? You were there probably looking at it as someone who was representing companies, but also as someone who was a competitor looking for something that you might want to use that would give you the edge, but then also as a tackle company looking to make sure that you have the right thing in stock. There really wasn't anybody that was looking at ICAST from any more angles than you were.
Yeah, I kind of looked at it as almost like the industry as a whole is really uncertain. It's like most companies didn't have as many new products as they usually do. There were still some great ones out there, and some different variations of already existing molds or shapes that they would have already had. But I think the whole industry is just kind of uncertain as to which direction everything is going to go. Our tournament trail is going to continue to allow live scope and forward facing sonar. We're going to see limitations or bans or anything like that on them. And it wasn't a bad ICAST, but it also wasn't one that was just full of game changers like we've seen in the past. So it was different, but I understand what was going on with all the companies, I think, and they're just kind of in limbo. And then you've also got a lot of companies now are taking the stance where they can't have it ready by ICAST, and let's face it, really middle of the summer is not the premier time to be launching a bait. That's when kind of the slowest part of the season for a lot of parts of the country is. A lot of them are taking the stance, hey, let's hold off until we actually have the product in stock ready to ship this fall, then we'll release it, or even next spring, and then release it that way. So with the media age, everything's able to get broadcast instantly, whereas the past ICAST was the place where you had to bring all your new products to launch no matter when they were going to actually come out.
I get the feeling, talking from a number of guys, that we're in for like a wild ride for the next couple years, just as far as the technology, the formats. It doesn't matter what tour you fish, whether it's the Elite Series or the BPT. I'm getting the feeling that it's not just going to be, hey, here's how it's going to be for the next 10 years. I think we're going to see a lot of experimenting and changing and trying things. Is that a fair assessment that you're kind of getting, or do you think we'll have a cut and dry answer by the end of this year as to what the next 5 to 10 years of professional bass fishing look like?
No, I think it's going to evolve every year. I'm hearing there's some new technology coming. I don't know any more than that as far as what that even is, how much better it's going to be, how much different it's going to look. But, the technology world's not going to stop. It's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to be something that's going to have to be kept up with and looked at on the front side of it by all the different leagues, where they can make a decision up front, not let it tick on for several years, and then decide, hey, it's time we might want to think about doing something. And I think that's kind of the problem that they're in, is they didn't realize what they were getting into on the front side of it until it's become so big. So I don't think anything will be cut and dry, black and white by the end of this year. I think we will see changes in several aspects, but they could get all reversed in a year, or they could get stricter the next year. Really no way to know about that.
You hit $250,000 this year in earnings, Michael. By far, I think that's your best single year as far as earnings.
Yeah, I think it is for just the Bass Pro Tour.
Yeah, when you got into this thing, I mean, you're still young. What are you, 31 or something?
32. Yeah.
32. And, someone sits there and says, hey, in 2024, you'll do $250,000 in the regular season. You've been at it a long time, but hell, that's an accomplishment, man.
Yeah, no, it's certainly can't complain about that. It takes a lot of top tens to add that up. 2 seconds at I think 40,000, 45,000 a piece. Those add up pretty quick. So, those close calls that I've had a ton of in my career, they're really hard on you mentally. But as far as the bank account there, you look at that and then it kind of makes some of that go away.
What's on your to-do list? You have back-to-back Angler of the Years in the Invitationals. You have the 2 BPT wins. You're over $1.5 million in earnings. Are you driven to get an Angler of the Year title? Is it more wins? What's driving you going into the 25 season?
Championship win would be number one for me at this point. That would be number one, Red Crest win. Number 2 would be Angler of the Year for the Bass Pro Tour. That seems like it's pretty well locked up about every year at this point, but that's definitely still a goal. Angler of the Year in the Invitationals was great. That's a 5-fish thing to win Angler of the Year in the every fish counts. That would be a totally different accomplishment. So, but still, winning a tournament is, probably easier to do than winning Angler of the Year because you have to be so consistent. You basically have to make the top 10 and at least 6 out of 7 of the tournaments to have a shot to win at the end of the year. But just winning those tournaments, that's just a feeling that you can't shake. Yeah,
you've got a second in the tackle in the title there, which was the Forest Wood Cup at the time in 16, a second in Red Crest. I gotta think you're gonna be one of the favorites at Guntersville this upcoming year. That's got to be kind of a one that you're looking forward to, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It used to be my second home lake, but when the eelgrass got into it, it's really changed it all. And that time of year we're going is probably going to be dead in the heart of the spawn, so definitely wouldn't be my preferred choice to be there. But still, it's going to be a great tournament. Guntersville's definitely been on the upswing the last few years. The pressure, for some reason, I guess it's the amount of eelgrass and the amount of habitat they have down there, but it really hasn't seemed to bother it. And it'll be some really, really good weights for Red Crest, probably the best we've ever had.
Interesting. You don't do the YouTube thing, do you?
Not very much. No, we've got a channel for Real Deal Tackle, and that's something I know I've got to start working on more. But I'm probably not going to start my own channel. Just create content through the Real Deal Tackle one. That's definitely on the to-do list from now that we've actually got a little bit of time for an off season for these next several months, is to start creating content, trying to figure out some weekly things to do. Maybe a monthly bigger video, different things like that, and try to figure out where we can go from there.
Yeah, you got to be one of the most, I would say you're probably the most influential angler in professional bass fishing that doesn't do the YouTube thing, which is a compliment.
It's just something that, I've never been, that's just not my style. I don't like having a camera stuck in my face and following me around 24/7. But at the same time, I understand that I see the benefits of it. No more than we've done for just the store here. I mean, I can see that happening for sure. And there's just so many avenues out there now to promote yourself, your brands, and your sponsors that it's hard to hit them all at one time. And, when I'm at home, like I'm in my office right now at Real Deal Tackles where I'm at, and I spend so much of my time here and I get to interact with a lot of customers one-on-one that kind of takes away from a lot of the time that a lot of other guys have to create video content. So it's a trade-off, but at the same time, I feel like the one-on-one conversations I get to have kind of differentiates myself from a lot of other guys. And you can be a lot more detailed. You can tell exactly what somebody's asking and be able to interact with that one person a lot differently.
I'm trying to think now, is there anybody that strictly makes their living off of tournament bass fishing with no secondary income, no YouTube channel, and no social media presence now? Are there any guys that are just out there that are just straight tournament fishing that just say, I'm not doing the social media, and they don't have a side gig? I'm racking my brain at it right now.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Kennedy, maybe?
Yeah, that was the one that came to my mind.
That's the only one that pops into my mind. Everybody else has got the social media thing going pretty hard.
That's wild. All right, anything else you want to get in here before I let you go? I know it's a work day at Real Deal Tackle.
Oh, it's all good. No, I mean, it was a great week overall. Can't complain with the year. Like you said, it was pretty good besides that one tournament. You said it was a 38th. It was 38th, but that's out of the 40 guys in my group, so it was really like a 76th. That was a really terrible tournament for me. But
oh yeah, that's like pretty much last then.
Yeah, pretty much last. So it was really bad, but just to come back. At least
they have the standings up now. At least they have the standings up on the website where I could go through and actually put together some statistics.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I'm looking forward to the off season, looking forward to, we're always changing things here around the shop and do a little hunting this year and look forward to next year, see what kind of changes we got to make, see what kind of hoops we got to jump through. I'm sure there'll be something come down the pipe that we're totally unexpected, but that's part of the game.
Michael Neal, thanks for jumping on.
Thank you.
All right. That is the one and only Michael Neal. Like I said, over the past 7-8 years, one of the top 5 most consistent anglers in the game. We did our Hallman, who someone was asking last week, can we get a Hallman update? When I get a Hallman update, I'll give everybody a Hallman update, but I think he's just loving life, doing his own thing at his own pace, and good on him. But Michael was on our BZ top 5 team for that year, and incredibly consistent because just when you think about him from like a media perspective, there's not like one thing that he does that like to me like jumps out like, oh, that's Michael Neal's deal. Where you've got some guys that go, you can think about everybody, it's like a flipping deal, or this guy cranks, or this guy jerk baits, or this guy finesse fishes. He just does everything really well. And one of the things that I think Michael does incredibly well is make good decisions on the water. So when you're good at everything and then you make good decisions on top of it, results in a lot of top 10 finishes. So make it sound easy. It's a lot harder to do in person. And that's why there's only about 20 guys on earth that are able to consistently do it right now. But that's all we got for BTL today. Same place, same time. Tomorrow we'll talk to everybody about it. Later.